The first thing I remember from that day was the silence. We were in a San Francisco cemetery, fog drifting in from the bay as my grandmother's casket was lowered into the earth. Heads bowed all around me, some mourners weeping quietly. But my parents weren't mourning. They were already at each other's throats. My father's voice sliced through the hush, accusing my mother of having no right to my grandmother's estate. She snapped back that she was entitled to half since she had been the only one at her bedside in her final weeks. Their argument grew louder, sharper, until those nearby shifted uneasily. Then my father turned on me. He didn't lower his voice or care who listened. Looking me dead in the eye, he said, "Ethan, you get nothing. You don't deserve a single dollar of her fortune." My mother followed, her tone like ice. "Your grandmother may have spoiled you, but she didn't raise a man worthy of the Roar name." The words struck harder than the chill in the air. My parents had never missed a chance to remind me I was a failure, but hearing it here, at my grandmother's funeral before family and strangers alike, was unbearable. My fists tightened as I fought to hold back my anger, knowing my voice would betray me if I spoke. I wanted to shout that I never cared about their money. All that mattered to me was her. Grandma Margaret was the only one who ever made me feel I belonged. Once she told me, "You see the world differently, Ethan. That's your gift." Now she was gone, and I stood surrounded by people who saw me as nothing but wasted space. What I didn't realize was that she had left me something far more powerful than wealth. As the service ended, the family lawyer approached quietly and pressed a sealed envelope into my hands. My name was written across it in her familiar script. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. The very first line stole my breath. San Francisco always seemed to wear beauty and coldness at once. The morning of her funeral was no different. Fog blanketed the streets, swallowed the Victorian rooftops, and clung to the church steeple like a heavy veil. Bells tolled slowly, each hollow note echoing through the cemetery, reminding me of everything I had lost. My grandmother, Margaret Roar, had been the heart of our family, though my parents never admitted it. She was the one who gathered us for holidays, remembered every birthday, and slipped me notes of encouragement when I crumbled under my parents' impossible expectations. Without her, our family felt like a house stripped of its foundation, leaning and ready to fall. I stood near the front in a borrowed black suit, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, head bowed, not in prayer, but to avoid looking at my parents. Clara and Victor Roar stood like royalty even in mourning. My mother's pearls gleamed against her black dress as she dabbed at dry eyes with silk. My father, stirring his silver tie, wore the same mask of control he always did. They looked like a grieving couple, but I knew better. Their grief was for her fortune. $12 million in assets, property, and careful savings. To them, her death was an opportunity, not a loss. When she was alive, Grandma had softened their edges. She squeezed my hand under the table while my father criticized me for not following him into law. She slipped me extra cookies when my mother scolded me about weight. In her gentle voice, she once told me, "Don't let them measure your worth with their ruler. You have your own gift. One day the world will see it." Those words carried me on nights when their disappointment suffocated me. My mother never hid her disdain. She wanted a son polished, ambitious, ruthless, not me. "You waste your time on art and books," she'd sneer. "Do you think paintings will feed you? Do you think your grandmother's money will carry you forever? It won't." My father's judgment cut deeper. He delivered his verdicts as if they were law. Once he told me, "You don't deserve the Roar name. You're weak." I hid my pain, but Grandma always saw through me. She reminded me that strength wasn't about wealth or dominance, but kindness and honesty, qualities she swore I had, even when I doubted myself. As the priest spoke of her life, I scanned the crowd. My Uncle Jonas sat restless, eyeing the casket as if it were a vault of riches. My cousins whispered, their crisp suits and bright eyes betraying anticipation of the will. None of them were really there for her. They were there for what she left behind. I felt like a stranger among them, voiceless in a family obsessed with power and money. But inside me, a storm raged. I loved her. I missed her. And I despised how her death had become a stage for greed. I closed my eyes, clinging to the memory of her laugh, soft, musical, able to brighten even the darkest day. I pictured her flour-dusted hands teaching me to bake bread as she told stories of growing up with nothing, building everything from scratch. That was the woman we were supposed to honor. Instead, all I heard was my parents' hissing argument behind me. By the time her casket touched the ground, I felt hollow. My family was unraveling before me, and I had no power to stop it. Yet beneath the emptiness flickered a spark. Grandma never acted without purpose. I couldn't yet imagine what she had left behind, but I sensed this day wasn't the end of her influence, it was the beginning. When the service ended, silence gave way to whispers, sidelong glances, and the hum of family politics. Some drifted to the reception hall, but my parents stayed by the casket. Their voices, low at first, rose sharp and cutting. "You don't get a cent of this estate," my father barked. "I built this family's name. I protected her fortune. You did nothing." Clara squared her shoulders. "You think you carried it alone? I was the one by her side when she was sick. I gave my time. I dealt with doctors. If anyone deserves a share, it's me." Their quarrel rang through the room, drawing stares. Uncle Jonas leaned lazily against a column, smirking as though entertained. My cousins whispered like spectators a match. I felt the weight of their gazes, waiting to see what role I would play in the drama. Then my father turned on me, his face flushed, his words loud enough to silence every whisper. "And you, Ethan, don't think for a second you're entitled to anything. You've done nothing. You are nothing but a disappointment." Heat surged through me, my heart pounding. My mother didn't defend me. She folded her arms, lips curling. "He's right," she said coolly. "Your grandmother may have indulged you, but she didn't prepare you for reality. You don't contribute. You don't lead. You are not part of what we've built." Their words hung in the air, cruel and public. One of my grandmother's old friends winced, her eyes soft with pity, but she said nothing. No one intervened. The hush of the crowd made my parents' cruelty ring even louder. Uncle Jonas let out a low, mocking laugh. "Guess you'll finally learn what it's like to earn your keep," he sneered. No more leaning on family handouts. Shame flamed in my chest. I wanted to shout that I'd never begged for money, that I didn't care about their riches the way they did. All I had wanted was their approval, some sign I mattered beyond my failures in their eyes. But I clenched my teeth and stayed silent, knowing my voice would betray me. I thought of Grandma telling me to hold my head high, to find strength in who I was rather than who they expected me to be. In that moment, though, her voice felt distant, drowned by my parents' rejection. Clara and Victor's arguments spiraled on, naming properties, assets, investments, each claim more selfish than the last. They no longer bothered to lower their voices. It was like my grandmother's grave had become the stage for their greed. The humiliation stuck to me. Whenever I glanced up, I met people's faces, some sympathetic, some amused. Nobody stopped them. Nobody told them they'd gone too far. I wanted to leave, but my legs held me in place. Every exchange between my parents chipped away at the family image I'd clung to. The truth settled over me. I was alone. My parents had made their verdict public. To them, I wasn't merely excluded from an inheritance. I was unfit to bear the family name. When their shouting finally eased, it wasn't because they'd reached a truce, but because they'd worn themselves out. My father's face was flushed. My mother wore a thin, triumphant smile, even though nothing had changed for her. My uncle whispered to a cousin, and they snickered as they moved away. I stood rooted, all eyes sliding off me. They had stripped away my dignity at the one place where I should have been allowed to grieve in private. I lowered my gaze and blinked to keep my vision steady. Inside, anger and sorrow clashed. I wanted to scream, to run, to vanish. But I stayed, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I assumed that would be the end. The funeral would be remembered for their fight and my shame. Then a soft voice behind me halted my retreat. "Ethan," the lawyer said quietly, "your grandmother left something for you." The argument still echoed in my head when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to Robert Hale, my grandmother's lawyer, tall, gray-haired, composed in a dark suit that somehow cut through the chaos around us. He spoke low so others wouldn't overhear. My grandmother had asked him to speak with me. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. My parents had just declared me worthless in front of everyone. Yet here was the man who knew the will's contents looking at me with a seriousness that meant this was between my grandmother and me. I nodded, throat dry, and followed him into a small study off the hall. The door shut, muffling the laughter and whispers. The room was dim, lit by a narrow stained-glass window. A wooden desk bore a single, aged envelope with my name scrawled across it in handwriting I knew at once. My grandmother's. My chest tightened as I approached. My fingers hovered before I touched it. Her handwriting had lived on birthday cards and notes tucked into my sketchbooks. Now it reached out from beyond the grave. Robert's voice was steady behind me. She left this for you alone. No one else was to see it. He trusted you. That line hit me harder than any insult my parents had thrown. In a household where I was constantly written off, my grandmother had singled me out with trust. I picked up the envelope. The paper felt thin but weighty in my hands. For a second, I feared it might be only a consoling letter, a kind note to soothe my exclusion. Hope had always been a dangerous thing for me. Still, I slipped my finger under the flap and opened it. Inside lay a folded letter in her neat script and a small brass key tied to a ribbon. My breath caught. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The first line stopped me cold. Ethan, you are the only one who ever truly saw me, not my money. This is why I trust you with what no one else knows. I read it over and over, each word cutting through the noise of my parents' cruelty. Her letter was full of loving urgency. She explained she'd built more than riches. She'd built a legacy she didn't want corrupted by greed. Then she described the key. It opened a safety deposit box at a bank near her old home. Inside was something she'd never told anyone about, something excluded from the estate and unknown to my parents and uncle. It was meant for me alone. A rush of conflicting feelings hit me. Relief I wasn't forgotten, gratitude that she'd left me something private, and fear because she hinted whatever was inside carried weight beyond money. Her tone made it feel like not just a gift, but a responsibility. Robert's words cut through my thoughts. She believed in you. She said you were the only one who could handle what she left behind. I closed my eyes, then chose. I could shove the letter back and continue the invisible life I'd always known, or I could take the key and the trust and step into whatever she had prepared. I reached for the brass. It was cool and heavier than I expected. As my fingers closed around it, something inside me settled. For the first time in years, I felt stronger than their words. I felt chosen. I slid the letter back into its envelope and tucked it into my jacket, the key clenched in my hand. Robert watched me with an unreadable look. When I promised to honor her trust, he simply nodded. Leaving the study, the reception's murmur washed over me. My parents still circulated the room, their smiles practiced, eyes scanning for advantage. They didn't notice me, and for once I was grateful. That night I barely slept. The envelope and key sat on my nightstand like a small, insistent promise. She had selected me for something they didn't know about. Her trust and the key replayed in my mind. What could be so important she'd hide it from everyone? By morning, I couldn't wait any longer. Rain had left the street slick as I walked to the bank named in her letter, an old brick building that felt like it had been there forever. Inside smelled of paper and polished wood. A clerk in a vest led me through to a vault with a museum-like door. He checked my ID against her authorization and brought me to the safety deposit room. I used the key. It turned as if it had been waiting for me. When the box slid free, my chest tightened. In a private room, I opened the heavy box. Inside were leather-bound journals tied with a faded ribbon, a velvet pouch, and another sealed envelope in her handwriting, "To Ethan, when you are ready." My hands shook as I untied the ribbon. The leather was soft and the pages yellowed. Opening the first journal was like stepping into her life. These were my grandmother's diaries, recorded over decades, the poverty she'd been raised in, the years she spent building the family fortune, the sacrifices she'd made, and the secrets she kept. As I read, I realized she had documented betrayals. Victor and Clara manipulating finances and steering investments for their own ends, and Jonas quietly siphoning money. She had known about their greed but stayed silent for the family's sake. Interwoven with the facts was a message for me alone. Ethan, you must know the truth. They will tear each other apart for wealth, but don't become like them. These journals are my legacy. With them comes responsibility and a choice about what to do with the truth. I sat back stunned. All my life I had been branded weak, unworthy, a disappointment. But here was proof my grandmother had seen what no one else had. Beneath all the scorn, she believed in me. She entrusted me with her story and with power. I untied the velvet pouch and rare heirlooms spilled across the table. A diamond brooch, a string of pearls, a gold pocket watch etched with her initials. Beneath them lay a certificate of ownership for a secluded coastal cottage, a property hidden from the rest of the family. She had left it all to me. Finally, I reached for the sealed envelope bearing my name. Her words were clear and firm. Ethan, I have left you what I could not trust in anyone else's hands. The journals hold truths I could never speak aloud. The jewelry and property are yours, reminders of my faith in you. Do not waste them. Wealth means nothing without integrity. Promise me you will carry forward what I valued most: honesty, kindness, and courage. Tears blurred the page. She had not only left me possessions, she had given me her heart, her trust, her belief that I could rise above the shadow my parents cast. For the first time, I felt truly seen. And I knew, if they ever discovered this, they would stop at nothing to take it from me. But I was no longer powerless. When I left the bank, the city looked unchanged, fog drifting between buildings, cable cars clattering by. Yet inside me, everything was different. I carried more than shame or rejection. I carried proof of my worth. I was no longer the forgotten son. I was the keeper of my grandmother's legacy. That night in my small apartment, I opened the first journal. Her handwriting filled the pages with her struggles, triumphs, and choices. I read until my eyes ached. And when I finally set it down, I felt as though she had given me a map. The jewelry and the deed were valuable, yes, but her words mattered more. Wealth means nothing without integrity. A week later, I visited the cottage. Perched on a cliff above the crashing waves, its shutters weathered, its garden wild, it felt like a sanctuary. Inside, photographs and keepsakes preserve her memory. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, and for a moment I swore I heard her laugh. This wasn't just a property. It was peace. It was freedom. For years, I believed my parents' cruelty meant I was broken. But standing there, I understood they were chained to greed. I had been free all along. She chose me because I could see beyond it. The journals weighed heavy with truth, corruption, betrayal, greed. I wrestled with whether to expose it or protect it. In the end, I understood her message. The power wasn't in tearing others down. It was in building a life true to her values. I wouldn't waste myself fighting for what they didn't deserve. I would honor her by choosing integrity, resilience, and love. Her funeral wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of the life she always wanted for me, one where I was no longer invisible or defined by rejection, but by the strength she had seen in me all along. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: family can fail you, parents can wound you, but love and belief from even one person can change everything. My grandmother gave me that gift. She taught me that our worth isn't measured by wealth or approval, but by the courage to be true to ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it, leave a comment with your own experiences, and subscribe for more stories like this. Your support means more than you know.